Welcome to Strategic Isomorphism, uncovering parallel logics of power across organizations, where we explore how diverse organizations solve remarkably similar problems despite their different contexts. Hi, I'm Kaede. My colleagues often joked that I spend my career finding the surprising similarities between mob bosses and CEOs. Though I promise the CEOs usually take that comparison better than you'd expect. Throughout my work studying power dynamics across varied settings, I've observed a fascinating pattern. From criminal organizations to government bureaucracies, from political administrations to tech companies, fundamentally different entities consistently develop parallel structures to solve the same underlying problems of control and coordination. Today, we'll dissect this phenomenon of strategic isomorphism, the convergence of organizational strategies despite radically different contexts. We'll explore how the Yakuza criminal syndicate, state bureaucracies, political administrations, and Silicon Valley tech companies all face the universal challenge of ensuring that people within their organizations act according to leadership goals. While acknowledging the profound differences in legitimacy between these organizations, we'll focus on their functional similarities in addressing control problems. Through DiMaggio and Powell's framework of coercive, normative, and mimetic isomorphism, we'll unpack why diverse organizations adopt strikingly similar approaches. As digital transformation reshapes working relationships and creates new principal-agent challenges, understanding these parallel structures becomes increasingly valuable. Let's begin by examining the universal challenge of delegation and control that all complex organizations must navigate, whether they're running a government agency or planning a heist. At the heart of all organizational control challenges lies the principal-agent problem, a fundamental dilemma that transcends organizational type, culture, or purpose. Think of it as the universal headache of leadership. How do you make sure people do what you want when you're not standing over their shoulder? It's like trying to ensure your teenager actually cleans their room when you're away for the weekend, except with billions of dollars and thousands of employees at stake. The core challenge emerges from three key dimensions: information asymmetry, where agents know things principals don't, like what's really happening on the front lines; goal misalignment, where personal incentives differ from organizational objectives, like when meeting your quota conflicts with customer satisfaction; and monitoring costs that make perfect oversight economically impossible, because who can afford to watch everyone all the time? These challenges manifest traditionally through management hierarchies, formal performance reviews, and carefully calibrated incentive structures. Control mechanisms remarkably similar whether you're running a Fortune 500 company or a criminal enterprise. Digital transformation has dramatically reshaped these dynamics, with remote work monitoring increasing 67% since 2020, algorithmic management systems replacing human supervision, and sophisticated digital surveillance tools tracking productivity in previously impossible ways. Current examples reveal the evolution of these control mechanisms. Platform workforces governed through reputation systems and algorithmic assignment, gig economy workers controlled through gamified incentives and real-time monitoring, and distributed teams managed through digital workspace surveillance. Recent research indicates 72% of organizations report increased delegation challenges in hybrid work environments. Essentially, the same principal-agent problem that has plagued organizations since the dawn of delegation, now with added Zoom fatigue and mute button mishaps. Hierarchy emerges as the universal solution to the principal-agent problem across astoundingly diverse organizational contexts. It's organizational gravity. No matter how hard you try to escape it, things eventually fall into a reporting structure. The Yakuza's structure revolves around the oyabun-kobun, or father-son, relationship model, creating clear lines of authority through ritualized kinship. State bureaucracies implement departmental divisions with formal reporting relationships. Tech companies, despite all their beanbags, and we're so flat, rhetoric maintain formal reporting lines where engineers report to managers, who report to directors, who report to VPs, creating accountability chains nearly identical to the DMV, just with better snacks. Political administrations, organized through hierarchical structures like the White House organization chart, or campaign leadership pyramids that clearly establish who can make which decisions. Even digital platform governance relies on hierarchical systems where content moderation teams operate in tiered structures, and developer relationships are organized into privileged access levels. These diverse organizations adopt hierarchy for remarkably similar functions, reducing complexity by establishing clear decision pathways, defining roles that limit individual discretion, and creating escalation processes for handling exceptions. The cross-cultural consistency is striking, with similar hierarchical patterns documented across 43 countries despite profound cultural differences. What's particularly amusing is how digital transformation is creating new hierarchical forms while simultaneously promoting, flattening narratives, essentially repackaging traditional control structures in contemporary language while preserving their essential function. It's like watching a tech CEO in a hoodie claiming they've eliminated hierarchy while implementing the same reporting structure a bank would use, just with titles like ninja and guru instead of manager and director. The convergence of these hierarchical solutions across radically different contexts represents a clear example of strategic isomorphism, different organizations independently arriving at similar structures to solve identical control problems, proving that whether you're running a crime syndicate or a startup, you'll eventually need to figure out who reports to whom. While hierarchy provides formal structure, network ties emerge as the essential complementary mechanism that makes organization possible in practice. If hierarchy is the organizational skeleton, networks are the nervous system, the connections that make things work beyond what's on the org chart. The Yakuza establishes these networks through brotherhood ceremonies and fictive kinship, creating bonds of loyalty that make members think twice before betraying each other, beyond just the fear of losing a finger. Political administrations rely on kitchen cabinets and informal advisors who exert influence outside official reporting lines. The Trump administration's reliance on family members and personal associates being a recent example, where the unofficial power often mattered more than the official titles. Tech companies cultivate network ties through team-building retreats. Nothing says, we're a family, like trust falls and matching t-shirts. Family rhetoric that frames corporate relationships in emotional terms, and cultural reinforcement activities designed to create connection beyond formal structures. State systems establish interagency working groups and cross-departmental task forces that create collaborative networks cutting across hierarchical boundaries. Digital workspace tools are reshaping these dynamics, with virtual team building proving 43% less effective at creating lasting relationships. Turns out sharing a virtual pizza isn't quite the same as breaking bread together in person. Network theory helps explain why these informal structures are necessary, with the concept of embeddedness demonstrating how economic transactions exist within social contexts. Strong ties providing reliability, while weak ties offer novel information, and trust propagation allowing vetted relationships to extend organizational reach. Current research indicates organizations with integrated formal and informal structures demonstrate 37% greater responsiveness to environmental changes, essentially leveraging both hierarchy and networks for adaptive capacity. The remarkable consistency of these network building approaches across different organizational contexts demonstrates strategic isomorphism in action. convergent solutions to the universal challenge of supplementing formal control with social connection. Whether you're building a crime syndicate or a tech company, you'll need both an org chart and a group chat to make things actually work. Beyond formal hierarchies and network connections, organizations must cultivate identity and obligation, essentially creating psychological commitment that motivates agents to act in the principal's interest even without direct supervision. It's the difference between someone thinking, "I have to do this because it's my job," versus, "I want to do this because it's who we are." The Yakuza employs elaborate tattooing rituals, strict adherence to the Jingi Code of Honor, and distinctive symbolic displays that visibly mark membership. State mechanisms include formal oath-taking ceremonies where officials swear allegiance, flag reverence, and other patriotic displays, and national narratives that frame service as a higher calling. Corporate methods leverage carefully crafted mission statements, often involving the words disrupt and innovate, explicit values frameworks that define expected behavior, and cultural rituals from annual retreats to recognition ceremonies. Political identity building occurs through emotionally charged rallies, shared ideological frameworks that explain the world, and distinctive symbolism from MAGA hats to campaign logos that visibly signal belonging. Digital workspaces create significant challenges for identity cultivation, with 63% of organizations reporting difficulties creating meaningful cultural connection in remote environments. Turns out Slack emoji reactions don't quite generate the same sense of belonging as in-person high fives. Social identity theory helps explain these practices, demonstrating how individuals derive self-concept from group membership and act to benefit groups they identify with, essentially solving the principal-agent problem through psychological alignment rather than mere incentives. Political identity building occurs through emotionally charged rallies, shared ideological frameworks that explain the world, and distinctive symbolism from MAGA hats to campaign logos that visibly signal belonging. Digital workspaces create significant challenges for identity cultivation, with 63% of organizations reporting difficulties creating meaningful cultural connection in remote environments. Turns out Slack emoji reactions don't quite generate the same sense of belonging as in-person high fives. Social identity theory helps explain these practices, demonstrating how individuals derive self-concept from group membership and act to benefit groups they identify with, essentially solving the principal-agent problem through psychological alignment rather than mere incentives. The final cornerstone of organizational control manifests through incentives and sanction systems, frameworks that make compliance advantageous and deviation costly. It's the organizational version of do this and get a cookie, don't do this or get a timeout, just with salaries and termination letters instead of actual cookies. The Yakuza employs straightforward approaches. Material rewards for those who generate revenue and follow orders, reputation enhancement through status markers and organizational advancement, and notoriously severe physical punishments for those who violate organizational norms, losing a finger being generally worse than getting a poor performance review, though some corporate cultures might make this a close call. State systems rely on formal promotion structures that reward organizational loyalty, legal penalties for those who violate rules or norms, and official censure that damages professional standing. Corporate approaches utilize elaborate compensation packages, carefully designed to align individual interests with organizational goals, defined career advancement pathways that reward desired behaviors, and formalized termination processes that remove non-compliant members. Political mechanisms leverage access privileges that grant proximity to power, position appointments that reward loyalty with formal authority, and public criticism that damages reputation when individuals deviate from leadership expectations. Digital transformation has revolutionized these systems through performance tracking technologies that enable previously impossible measurement precision, algorithmic evaluation that standardizes assessment, and digital reputation systems that create persistent consequence records. Despite their diverse contexts, all these organizations employ the universal carrot and stick logic, rewarding behaviors that serve organizational interests while punishing those that undermine them. Current research indicates most organizations overemphasize extrinsic motivation, when intrinsic drives often prove more powerful for complex tasks, essentially applying industrial-era incentive models to knowledge work, and then wondering why people aren't motivated by the quarterly pizza party. The cross-organizational patterns are revealing. Comparable progression paths from entry-level to leadership positions, similar violation categories that trigger sanctions, and status-based privileges that mark organizational standing. Whether you're managing a crime family or a corporate finance team, you'll eventually need to figure out who gets rewarded, who gets punished, and how to make the math work in favor of organizational goals. Digital transformation is fundamentally reshaping the architecture of organizational control, creating new manifestations of age-old power dynamics. It's like organizational control got a software update, same core functions, just with fancier features and more notifications. The remote work challenge has forced organizations to develop supervision approaches that function without physical co-presence, essentially reinventing monitoring for distributed teams who might be working in pajamas. Algorithmic management represents perhaps the most profound shift, with performance tracking systems that continuously measure productivity. Did you really need that bathroom break? And automated decision systems that remove human judgment from traditional management functions. Digital surveillance has become normalized through productivity monitoring tools that track keyboard activity and application usage, alongside activity tracking software that creates unprecedented visibility into worker behavior. Platform control mechanisms have pioneered new approaches through rating systems that create persistent performance records. Your Uber rating is forever. Algorithmic assignment that replaces managerial discretion, and granular performance metrics that enable micro-level evaluation previously impossible in human-managed systems. Emerging technologies further extend these capabilities, with sentiment analysis adopted by 57% of large enterprises to evaluate communication tone. Your emails are being judged for enthusiasm. Behavioral analytics identifying patterns in digital activities, and predictive retention models flagging potential departures before employees themselves may have decided to leave. What's particularly striking is the cross-sector adoption pattern, with similar tools implemented across corporate, government, and nonprofit contexts, despite their different purposes and cultures. A clear example of mimetic isomorphism, as organizations copy apparently successful approaches faster than you can say best practices webinar. The theoretical implications are profound. Digital environments create a panopticon effect where workers never know if they're being watched, but must assume they are. Quantified self-pressure forces individuals to optimize measurable performance metrics regardless of actual value creation. And algorithmic accountability shifts responsibility from human managers to technical systems. The consistent adoption of these approaches across different organizational contexts reveals strategic isomorphism accelerating through technological change, essentially digitizing the principal-agent problem rather than solving it. The message is clear. Whether you're working for a tech startup or a government agency, your boss has been replaced by an algorithm that's watching your bathroom breaks and judging your email tone. The pandemic-accelerated shift to remote work between 2020 and 2025 created a natural experiment in organizational control, revealing strategic isomorphism in action as diverse organizations converged on remarkably similar digital workspace monitoring approaches. It was like watching parallel evolution in fast forward, organizations from different ecosystems independently developing identical surveillance organs. The initial conditions of pandemic-driven remote work adoption forced organizations to rapidly develop new control mechanisms without physical supervision, essentially asking the panic-inducing question: how do we know people are actually working when we can't see them? The answer, apparently universal, was track absolutely everything they do online. Key developments followed a consistent pattern across organizational types. Employee monitoring software adoption increased 312% between 2020 and 2025, because nothing says, "We trust you," like taking screenshots of your desktop every 5 minutes. Productivity analytics became directly integrated with performance management systems. Algorithmic evaluation increasingly replaced manager judgment for routine assessment, and resistance movements emerged against what employees perceived as excessive digital surveillance. What's particularly revealing from an isomorphism perspective is the cross-sector pattern. Nearly identical monitoring tools were adopted across corporate settings from financial services to manufacturing, government agencies from federal departments to local municipalities, and educational institutions from K-12 to universities. Despite these organizations having fundamentally different purposes, cultures, and stakeholder relationships, the evidence for strategic isomorphism is compelling. Organizations with nothing in common beyond the remote work challenge independently adopted nearly identical monitoring systems, primarily through mimetic isomorphism, as they copied approaches that appeared successful elsewhere without clear evidence of effectiveness. Emerging countermovements reveal the dialectical nature of control evolution. Digital autonomy advocacy, promoting worker privacy, right to disconnect legislation gaining traction in multiple jurisdictions, and worker-owned platforms developing alternative governance models that distribute control rather than centralizing it. This case study demonstrates how crisis accelerates isomorphic processes as organizations facing similar novel challenges rapidly converge on common solutions, essentially reinventing the same control mechanisms through digital means rather than developing fundamentally new approaches. The result: whether you're a teacher, government employee, or corporate worker, chances are your organization purchased the same surveillance software and is watching you in exactly the same ways, just with different logos on the privacy policy you didn't read. Our examination of control architecture across diverse organizational contexts reveals clear patterns of strategic isomorphism that have significant theoretical and practical implications. It's like discovering that despite their different exteriors, organizations from crime syndicates to corporations are running on the same operating system with only slight customizations. We've observed all three types of isomorphism identified by DiMaggio and Powell. Coercive isomorphism, where regulatory requirements drive similar compliance structures across different organizations. Mimetic isomorphism, where uncertainty leads organizations to imitate apparently successful models rather than developing novel approaches. And normative isomorphism, where professional standards and best practices create convergence across otherwise different contexts. The connection to principal-agent theory is particularly illuminating. The universal challenge of ensuring agents act in principal's interests produces remarkably similar solutions despite profoundly different contexts. Hierarchy, networks, identity, and incentives consistently emerge as complementary control mechanisms. Network theory helps explain why formal structures alone prove insufficient, with informal relationships critically supplementing official hierarchies through trust-based connections that reduce monitoring costs. The practical implications are significant for organizational design. Leaders can learn valuable approaches from studying apparently unrelated contexts. Your corporation might benefit from understanding how criminal organizations handle loyalty. Understanding isomorphic pressures helps evaluate whether practice adoption represents genuine improvement or mere conformity pressure. And recognizing how digital transformation amplifies, rather than eliminates control challenges, can improve technology implementation. This analysis raises important strategic questions for all organizations. When does isomorphism help versus hinder organizational effectiveness? Convergent practices may represent accumulated wisdom or merely unchallenged assumptions. How can control architecture be designed to ensure both compliance and innovation? Tight control systems may prevent deviation, but also stifle creativity. The organizational equivalent of helicopter parenting that produces rule followers who can't think for themselves. Perhaps most fundamentally, do emerging digital tools fundamentally change organizational control dynamics or merely reinvent traditional approaches through new technological means? The evidence suggests more continuity than disruption, essentially digitizing the principal-agent problem rather than solving it. By understanding the parallel logics that drive organizational structures across contexts, leaders can make more informed decisions about which isomorphic pressures to embrace and which to resist, potentially finding novel solutions to age-old control challenges rather than just buying the same monitoring software as everyone else. To conclude our analysis of control architecture across diverse organizational contexts, I'll highlight our key findings. First, organizational control systems show remarkable convergence despite profound contextual differences, from criminal organizations to government bureaucracies, from political campaigns to tech companies. Fundamentally different entities develop strikingly similar approaches to ensuring compliance with leadership goals. It's like discovering that despite their different exteriors, a crime boss and a CEO reach for the same toolkit when trying to make people do what they want. Structural patterns consistently emerge across these contexts. Hierarchical systems establishing clear authority lines, network relationships supplementing formal structures, identity cultivation creating psychological commitment, and incentive systems aligning individual interests with organizational goals. Understanding isomorphic pressures helps leaders evaluate practice adoption decisions, distinguishing between genuine effectiveness and mere conformity to prevailing trends. Or, as I like to tell my consulting clients, just because everyone else is implementing an open office plan doesn't mean you should. Our key insights illuminate why these patterns persist. Principal-agent problems create similar solutions across diverse organizations because the fundamental challenge of ensuring delegates act in the principal's interest transcends organizational type or purpose. Digital transformation is reinventing rather than eliminating traditional control mechanisms, essentially digitizing supervision rather than fundamentally rethinking the relationship between organization and individual. The evidence is compelling. Remote work monitoring increased 67% since 2020 as organizations struggled with digital principal-agent challenges. Organizations with integrated formal and informal structures demonstrate 37% greater responsiveness to environmental changes, and 63% of organizations report difficulties cultivating meaningful identity in digital workspaces. Strategic isomorphism isn't merely an academic curiosity. It's a powerful force shaping how organizations structure themselves, often unconsciously adopting approaches from apparently unrelated contexts that face similar underlying challenges of control and coordination. The next time you see a corporate mission statement on the wall, remember you're witnessing the white-collar equivalent of a crime family's code of honor. Different packaging. Same function of creating psychological alignment without constant supervision. Sometimes understanding organizational behavior is simply recognizing that however different the players, the game remains remarkably consistent. In our next episode, we'll explore the logic of leverage, parallel economic strategies, examining how diverse organizations employ remarkably similar economic tools to exercise power despite their different contexts and purposes. If this episode was about how organizations get people to do what they want, our next episode is about how they get other organizations to do what they want, using money as the universal persuader. We'll investigate how criminal organizations, state actors, political administrations, and technology companies all utilize economic coercion as an influence mechanism, essentially imposing costs on noncompliance while offering benefits for cooperation. We'll analyze striking similarities in resource acquisition and management approaches, examine parallel strategies for market opportunity exploitation, and uncover how access control functions as a universal power source across organizational types. From a state imposing sanctions on another country to a tech platform changing its terms of service for developers, we'll see how the same fundamental economic leverage strategies appear in dramatically different contexts, but serve identical functions, making economic compliance more attractive than resistance. As you observe different organizations between now and our next episode, we'll watch for these patterns. Economic leverage being applied through apparently different mechanisms that serve identical functions, resource dependency relationships that create similar power dynamics despite different contexts, and market control strategies that restrict access to create leverage. This is Kaede, signing off until next time, when we'll continue our exploration of strategic isomorphism by following the money across organizational boundaries. Remember that understanding parallel organizational logics isn't merely academic. It provides practical insight into how power operates across contexts, revealing the common patterns beneath apparently different surfaces. After all, whether it's the Yakuza controlling territory or Amazon controlling market access, the logic of leverage remains remarkably consistent.